Hello? Test?
Testing.
I always get this mixed up. I don't want to join with the computer audio, right?
No, yeah, no audio. Do not want.
Okay. It says, do you want to join without audio? I guess I have to say yes. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay.
Let me try. Do you mind if I try?
Oh, please, yeah.
Try that. There it is. Let's test it. Testing. Testing.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. It's still echoing.
Has to go on to.
Not sure which was.
Okay.
That's better.
Can you turn down master the master volume?
Hello, testing.
Up a little bit.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4.
What?
Hello? I'm testing.
Is that good?
I'm getting an echo.
Still getting it.
Oh, yeah.
I can hear you and I don't hear the echo.
I tried this, yeah, it's unmuted.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, sure, whatever you'd like to do. Yeah.
Which one, me or?
I could check that one. Yeah.
So it's the one with the outcome. It's like you have to go.
Hi, Susan.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so I want to I'd like to call to order the study session for Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023 at 6:00 PM. And may I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Scazola.
Here.
Councilmember Furtado.
Here.
Vice Mayor Landry
Present.
and Mayor Biden.
Present. Is there any public comment? And we have one new business item tonight, which is the Cities Association of Santa Clara County's proposed joint powers agreement to establish the Cities Association of Santa Clara County Joint Powers Agency. And I would like to welcome our two panelists to the meeting, Nisa Flygore, who is the first vice president of the Cities Association Executive Board, and Shali Surkay, our executive director of the Cities Association. Welcome to both of you. And I'll let you proceed, Nisa and or Shali, with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Happy to be here. I see I have some internet instability, so I hope it sticks with us. So nice to see everybody. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff. It is weird being on this side of the dais. I think this is the first time I am presenting to a city council as a council member. So it does feel a little bit different, but happy to be here. For those listening who I haven't met yet, Nisa Flygore, as the mayor said, I am the current first vice president for the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. And with me is Shali Surkay, who is our executive director. And we just really want to thank staff and the council members for making the time this afternoon to schedule this study session for us to talk about the Joint Powers Authority that the Cities Association is considering transitioning to. We know the mayor is familiar with this topic. She has sat through many meetings as your representative at the Cities Association, but we understand that there's some councils who want to have a study session so that their other council members can hear about why we're proposing the JPA and what it would mean for Campbell. So that's why we're here, and we have a presentation, Mayor. Are we able to share our screen?
Yes, you're able to do that.
Mayor, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So we thought we would start with providing an overview of the Cities Association when we started, what has transpired over the last 20 plus years, and why we are recommending, based on our attorney's recommendation, to move to a JPA structure. So Santa Clara County, as you all know, is one of the largest counties in California. We have a population of close to 2 million residents. The Cities Association was formed 23 years ago, and over the years, the association has considered different structures for the organization. It took us a long time to get to this place where the legal recommendation is clear for us to move to a JPA and the reasons for that. But for the past 23 years, we have operated as a non-governmental unincorporated organization. And our interests and projects have evolved over the years, where we've been able to do more as an organization to benefit the 15 cities that have been part of the Cities Association. After considering different forms that the Cities Association could take in order to address some of the concerns that we had as an organization. As I mentioned a couple of years ago, our general counsel at the time had recommended to the board to form a joint powers authority. And the board back in August 2020, so over 3 years ago, voted to move forward with creating a JPA. It has taken us a couple of years. There have been changes in the organization and of course COVID. And so for different reasons, it has taken us a couple of years to get to this point. But we're happy to be able to go to the different cities to now explain why we are recommending moving to a JPA. We quickly wanted to also share some of our wins, some of the reasons why we believe it's important for the Cities Association to continue, why it benefits all the cities who are members of the Cities Association, and why, if we all agree there are all these benefits to having a Cities Association, then the best structure would be a JPA. Many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with SVCE, which is the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. That was created through collaboration and support of the Cities Association. The single-use plastic bag ban ordinance, which was passed by all our cities, that idea also originated at the Cities Association. And I'll stop there just to talk about the ordinance as a good example, where, as Mayor Bybee knows, you have representatives from all the 15 cities coming together once a month, sharing ideas, sharing things they're working on as a city, and benchmarking, how different cities are addressing and tackling different issues. The single-use plastic ban is a great example of where all 15 cities, because they had this monthly meeting where they could all share ideas and work together, we were able to work together, all 15 cities, to put together an ordinance along with the county that we could all pass in our cities. And as you know, we all cross city lines when we go grocery shopping and do other things. And so it sent a strong message that all 15 cities were able to do this, and we collaborated, and it was a much stronger message to our broader community, what we all stood for. The Healthy Cities Dashboard also resulted from a collaboration with the Cities Association and Santa Clara County, the Public Health Department, and the Planning Collaborative, which I know many of you are familiar with as we all go through our housing element updates. Having this Planning Collaborative, which is funded through ABAG, but we are an organization where it sits. We've all benefited and continue to benefit from having this planning collaborative. And then during COVID, I was mayor in 2021, and I still remember how valuable it was to be able to have both the Cities Association meetings where I could talk with and collaborate and move certain things forward with my colleagues from other cities, but also having the Cities Association work with the county as an organization. And I can't tell you the number of times board supervisors have said, how efficient and easier and effective it is to be able to work directly with the Cities Association, where you have one representative from each city at the table. And then, of course, LAC, the Legislative Action Committee. I have been fortunate to have been the chair of LAC twice. And I know firsthand how effective it is when we lobby and take a position on a proposed bill in Sacramento. Our representatives in Sacramento, they seek out our opinion. When I was chair, I would get phone calls if we sent a letter either opposing or supporting a bill or proposing amendments. They wanted to hear why the Cities Association had those concerns and see if there was something they could address. As many of you know, they also, want to come to our Cities Association meetings to talk about proposed bills and how they believe it will benefit our cities. Again, having this organization where we can have representatives come and talk to us, and also where we can affect and make a difference on the bills in Sacramento is another benefit and accomplishment of the Cities Association. So what is a JPA? We have many JPAs in California. SVCE is a JPA, and I'm sure many of you sit on other JPAs. So it's a structure we're all familiar with. They're legally created entities that allow two or more public agencies to jointly exercise common powers. And they're laws, no surprise, that govern the formation and the operations of a JPA. It's called the Joint Exercise of Powers Act. And when you look at that government code section, it lays out all the possible things particular JPA could do as an organization. And so what's important to understand is our JPA and what we're creating and what we plan to do as a JPA will be a lot different from other JPAs, because you do have to tailor it to what you want your JPA to be and to be able to do. And I'll just make a plug here that the draft that I think is in your packet, that's what we did. We basically, the first attorney, we've had 3 attorneys now since we started this process. But, one of the earlier attorneys, he started with a document that said, here's the government code section. Here are the possible things we can do. Now let's share them with the representatives on the Cities Association. Let's share it with the city attorneys that represent all the cities. Let's share it with the city managers. And let's get their feedback to make sure that as we narrow the scope and we focus what the authority should be doing, it reflects who we want to be as an association, while at the same time, it allows us to continue doing the things that we have been doing as a cities association. And then, the third bullet is very important based on what we've gone through over the last couple of years, forming a separate entity. And that was one of the big concerns when we were an unincorporated organization. And we learned this even more so over the last 2 years, where there was no clear line to say that, if there is a legal claim, whether or not or cities would be individually liable. And I'm trying to stay away from legal jargon. I'm not wearing my attorney hat. I'm wearing my Cities Association hat. But one of the benefits of the JPA is it's a separate legal entity, separate from each of our cities. And so all liabilities and obligations of the JPA will stay with the JPA. So hypothetically, and if there are claims or any other liability or obligation issues related to the JPA, that would remain and be contained to the JPA. And then this goes into more detail about, what we need to do to form the JPA. One of the things, if your council has no more questions, we will ask for you to agendize this for a city council meeting so that you can approve joining the JPA. And one of the things each city will need to do to become part of this JPA is to sign the JPA agreement. And one of the asks is to have your city manager sign this document. So that you would, delegate authority to the city manager to sign the document. But that's one of the steps in forming the JPA. And only contracting cities can approve it, meaning, hypothetically, well, let's use the county. The county would not be a party to the JPA. Therefore, the county would not be asked to sign this JPA. And the government code also requires another benefit of being a JPA. The government code clearly states and holds JPAs accountable, including regular audits. And I think our city managers would appreciate that. This continues other benefits of a JPA, clarification of tax status, which has been an issue for years. We will also be able to apply for regional and statewide grants, something we weren't able to do before. It allows us to have more long-term fiscal strategy that would hopefully keep costs down while maximizing collaboration with external partners. And then access to insurance, which is not available to unincorporated entities as easily as a JPA. And as many of you know, because of our challenges over the last couple of years on our current status, we do not have insurance. And so another reason we need to move as quickly as possible to a JPA is to make sure that we're protecting our cities, but also that we can get insurance in place to protect the organization. I do want to underscore the regional and statewide grants opportunity, because I know, and Mayor Bybee, I know you raised this as well about the cost to cities and what that will look like as a JPA. One of the benefits is, and of course the board will make the decision about the budget and the dues going forward, but one of the benefits of the JPA is the ability to get grants right? Which will offset, I think, some of the costs we may incur as an organization, or maybe, if there's an initiative or a project that the cities association wants to do down the road, unlike before, where we would need to tap into our cities association funds and resources and go back to each city. There may be grants available that we now qualify to apply for. And then more highlights of the, JPA and the benefits. You should have a draft of the JPA. And as I mentioned, this has gone through different versions. It's been reviewed by different groups. We tried to highlight here the items that were raised by most groups. One, it was the concern that we have an executive committee, and for those who are not familiar with the structure of the Cities Association, we have the executive committee, which before a formal JPA agreement was called the executive board. And that consists of president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and the legislative action committee chair. They're essentially the administrative arm of the board. And then separately, you have the board of directors, where each city has a seat at that table. And before the JPA, it wasn't, the roles of the executive board and the board of directors were not clearly defined. And there was concern from some members that the executive board may have too much power. At least it wasn't clear what they could do versus what the board could do. And so as you will see in your draft JPA, it clearly spells out what the executive committee can do. And it clearly states that all the decisions, personnel and otherwise, we are going to have the board of directors make that decision unless the board delegates it to the executive committee. We also changed the name from executive board to executive committee for the JPA, just to make sure that delineation, that line is very clear. And then the joint powers as agency, also another concern that was raised, where it wasn't clear going forward if we would be able to hire employees. And based on our legal advice and what we heard from a lot of city managers, it is very clear in the JPA that we will not hire employees. Or independent contractors cannot become a member of CalPERS. We will also not acquire property, exercise eminent domain, or impose taxes, other concerns that were raised. Again, we took what you could do with a JPA and we whittled it down to make sure it reflected what we wanted as an organization. And then the last thing I do want to touch on here is the City Selections Committee, which is actually mandated under another California Government Code section. Currently, the City Selection Committee is housed under the Cities Association. This is very similar to San Mateo County, whereby their Cities Association is also a JPA, and they have their City Selections Committee housed under that JPA. And it makes a lot of sense. It makes it very efficient and easy to carry out the functions of the Selections Committee, because you already have all the cities as part of the Cities Association. And so with the notices of openings and having people participate, it really makes a lot of sense to have the City Selections Committee housed as part of the Cities Association. And if we move to a JPA, it would continue to be part of the City Selection. The City Selection Committee would continue to be part of the JPA. Two questions we received related to the City Selection Committee. One, if a city is not part of the JPA, can they still get appointed through the City Selections Committee? Yes. The JPA would still do the notice to all the cities. There's this opening on ABAG, all the different groups, and give every city an opportunity every council member an opportunity to apply for the position. And then the second question we receive is, hopefully not, because I think there's so much value to all of us to have Cities Association. But in the event we decide not to form the JPA, what happens to the City Selections Committee? Because it's a legally mandated group, then as a county, we would have to figure out where to house a city selection committee and what group or office will manage that committee and process. But it would still have to find place in order to administer this legal mandate of appointing council members from each county to regional boards. Budget and membership dues, Mayor Bybee, I know you raised this at the board meeting. I was sitting right next to you. We currently have a dues structure. And it's based on population size. We've been doing that for several years, and it has worked well. It makes a lot of sense. It also helps us, justify one city, one vote. So even though San Jose is, 10 times or more the size of my city, Los Altos, San Jose still gets one vote. On the board, just like Los Altos, Campbell, Montserrat, and all the other cities. And so moving forward as a JPA, the proposal is to maintain the same dues structure, which it's based on population size. Mayor Bybee had asked, well, if we don't have all cities join the JPA, does that mean our dues will go up? The answer is no. In November, or if there's a subsequent special meeting called, once we know how many cities will be part of the JPA, the dues amount for each city would remain the same. But what would need to happen is we would need the board of directors to look at our budget and determine adjust the budget. Where do we need to make cuts? Where do we need to make adjustments? Are there things now that we're a JPA we can seek funding for through grants? But the plan and proposal is to keep the same dues. Your dues will not go up, even if 9, 10, 14 cities join. The plan is to still have the same dues and budget proposal. The budget will be reviewed by the board based on the dues amounts going into next year. I'm almost done. The value of the membership of I touched on this already. Of course, the collective voice. I can tell you firsthand how effective it is when we talk to our representatives and we go into even the offices of non-Santa Clara County representatives, and you say you're with the Cities Association, 15 cities, Santa Clara County. They do pay attention. Collective participation in projects, and then of course, I think I've called it our therapy session. It's really a forum for us to learn from each other, to bond, to hear what's happening in other cities. And, having this organization, a JPA, allows us also to do things once those bonds and friendships and collaborations happen. Now, the next steps would be, so this is a study session. There are many other cities who went straight to a council meeting. So for Campbell, we're here to answer any questions you may have, but the next step would be for you to agendize it. And we're asking cities to agendize it before November 9th. On your council agenda to approve Campbell joining the JPA under the terms of the Joint Powers Agreement. So that would be the next step for Campbell. And then at our November 9th meeting, which is our last regularly scheduled Cities Association meeting, we will poll to see if we have 9 or more cities that have approved joining the Cities Association as a JPA. In your staff report, you'll see we had a provision, and this is based on a question from a city manager. What if at the November 9th meeting, there's a city that wants to make one more change to the JPA before they can approve it? The plan is, if it's non-substantive, then the delegation that you would give Mayor Bybee, because I assume she'll still be your representative on November 9th, would be she has authority to approve non-substantive changes. There was a comma missing. It should be substantive instead of substandard. Things like that, you would have delegation so that you wouldn't have to go back to every single council again. If it's a substantive change, then it would be up to the 9 or more council members from the councils that have approved the JPA to decide if it's really worth it to them. This change that a city may suggest, is it really worth going back through their councils again, or can they live with the JPA as it's drafted without going back with that change? And then once we have the November 9th meeting and we see where everybody is, then the board will vote to move forward with dissolving the Cities Association as we know it today. And it's a whole process that our attorneys will take care of. You know, we'd register the JPA. And then once, and I think at the same time, we'll start the process to draft our new bylaws. We currently have bylaws, but of course they would need to be updated once we have this new structure. And that will be done with the board and the attorneys and everybody involved, figuring out, we have the existing bylaws, what do we need to change based on this new structure? You know, what was missing before that? Now let's take this opportunity to add. And then we will also prepare personnel policy handbook, which would include policies that apply to our independent contractors and board members. Something again that we identified as something that we should have as a JPA, because it helps all our cities, which is the primary goal of all of this. And that with that, Mayor Bybee, that's the end of our presentation. I do want to check in with our executive director, Sir Kay, to see if she has anything she would like to add before we turn it back to you.
No, I thought that was wonderful. It's great.
So thank you, Nisa. It was a very good comprehensive report and I appreciate it. And I think what I'll do is I'll actually defer to the city manager to see if he has anything that wasn't covered in the presentation that he feels might be needing some additional information before I open it to questions of our council.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for Nisa and Shali for being here. We appreciate your participation. I did want to clarify for the council, our staff report talks about possibly coming back on October 17th. After further thought and hearing the presentation, I think that date would probably be your first council meeting in November instead of October 17th. That we will bring it back to you, allow us some time to digest, allow some of the other cities to start responding. And so by the time we take action, we have the totality of what we're hearing from, if there's any changes from some of the other cities. So that was the only addition I would add, just as far as our process and our time.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up to council for questions. Anyone want to begin? Councilmember Furtado.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nisa, for the presentation. I appreciate that. One of the strengths that I've always found about the Cities Association is that it includes all cities of the county. And I just really think that's so important. And yet it appears that some cities are somewhat reluctant to move in this direction. And I'm wondering, are you able to, or can you address any of their concerns to allay, any of their fears that you might accommodate what they might be proposing? Obviously, I don't know what those things might be, so that we can stay a joint cities association, because we learn so much from one another and have good, cooperative efforts. So that concerns me, and I guess it would others as well. And I just wondered if that's something you can continue to work on.
Thank you, Councilmember Furtado, and you're exactly right. I share your thoughts about why we're so strong as an organization. It's because to date we've had 15 strong cities involved. I will tell you, to date we have been working with all the cities to address their concerns. I think we have addressed most of the concerns, and we've revised the JPA to address their concerns. So we're actually hoping that with this revised JPA we get all 15 cities on board. One of the questions, and I know Mayor Bybee had touched on it as well, and I know by providing the proposed due structure, other cities are quick, at least we know what that will look like going forward. Very similar to whether or not we'll have authority to acquire property. No, we won't. Whether or not we will have an executive committee that will make decisions independent of the executive board. No, we won't. Will we be able to impose taxes? No. So we went through, to your point, Councilmember Furtado, all the concerns that we heard from the different cities and their staff, and we've addressed them. And we'll continue to do that because, as you said, we do want as many, if not all 15 cities to be part of our organization. The plan right now is to have, if we have 9 by November 9th to move forward with the formation, because all it requires is if a city, let's hypothetically say we have 13 cities by November 9th that want to be part of the organization, we will move forward with forming the JPA. And then the other 2 cities can join at any time. They just need to agendize the JPA and sign it and become part of our group. I said to someone else that we don't want every city to wait until to see what every other city does, right? Because then nobody will do anything. I am proud to say that my city, Los Altos, we approved it last week. So we were the first, and we hope many will follow, because I do think, Councilmember Furtado, other cities are looking to see what other councils do. So I hope there's leadership on all the different councils to say, no, this is a good thing for our cities, let's do it. And I do think more cities will follow.
Okay, thank you. I do have a few more questions, if you don't mind. First of all, with respect to the joint powers, will the document spell out exactly what joint powers are being empowered by the JPA? In other words, usually, when we have other JPAs, it's for a specific purpose, stormwater management, emergency management, these kind of things. So I'm wondering if in this case, you will actually spell out those joint powers that are intended. And if I might follow up with another comment about that, you mentioned that the JPA would be eligible to apply for regional and statewide grants. Would the distribution of those successful grants be pre-planned in advance, or I guess that you can't decide that right now, or would they be the funds equally distributed amongst all the cities?
So through the mayor, if I may, Councilmember Furtado, let me start with the grant question, because the board would decide. So each city has a representative on the board, and for the grant application, it would be for a cities association project. And so, if it's a project that somehow touches 5 of the cities and not the others, that's something the board would have to decide, how to go about distributing those funds. But it would not be for each city. It would be for it's a separate entity now. So it would be for the JPA, and it would be used for the JPA and any projects or initiatives that the JPA is doing. And the board would make that decision. And the board, as I mentioned, has a representative from each city. On the joint powers, we do spell out in the draft JPA that's in your packet what this agency would do. And as I mentioned, we started out with everything that the government code allows for, and we've narrowed it down. It's really to allow us to continue the great work we're doing, where we collaborate on initiatives and projects. We're able to lobby together on bills that we all support or take positions. We'll be able, to apply for grants. That's another benefit. So those are the joint powers that we see ourselves doing together. We also host events, as you know, we've collaborated on working with the county and other agencies to do things for all our cities. So it's a very narrow scope of powers, and that's intentional because we do not want cities to believe that somehow we're infringing on their powers and their authority, or wanting to step into what they do as individual and independent cities. So the joint power is very narrow focus. It's the power to be able to collaborate, work together, take positions as a group, 15 cities strong.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And then one last question. You mentioned that the document or the provisions would mean that there would be no employees hired by the JPA. But of course, right now, we do have, if you will, an employee or someone who manages those things for us. How will that work in the future then?
So just to clarify, Executive Director Surkesh is an independent contractor. I will say in the past, we had employees. And again, we've learned a lot from the past. And as we move forward to this better structure of a JPA, we're improving on the things that we've learned. And we've already put in place where we have independent contractors. And under the JPA, we have spelled out clearly, as an organization, we will not have employees. We will not be able to hire employees. And we will, or independent contractors cannot be members of CalPERS. Really making sure that we're protecting our JPA as an entity by doing this.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions of Lisa? Councilmember Scazola?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm very much a believer in the collective voice, and so Cities Association, I'm a strong proponent for it. And I was, disappointed to hear that maybe one or two of the cities currently within it are thinking otherwise, like, oh, maybe we'll leave. But so I guess I thank you with one of Councilmember Furtado's questions. You kind of answered one of my questions, which was how might we get them on board? And then, so I want to modify my question. How might we be able to, what's the potential for growth actually?
Through the mayor, for growth of the organization, or?
Yes, thank you.
So and that's another great thing about the JPA because of how it's legally structured. In order for us to expand beyond what's currently in the JPA, first, we would need to take it to the board of directors for them to approve doing that. Then again, it would have to go back to each city to approve expanding the scope of the organization. I'm going to answer another part of your question since you mentioned other cities, one or two who may have raised concerns. If on November 9th, we have 9 or more cities that are willing to move forward under this current structure, then we would move forward under this current structure as a JPA. The other 6 cities, if they would like to join the JPA after November 9th, or if there's a special meeting called, then they would just need to notify the Cities Association. They would get a copy of the JPA and they would just need to take it to their councils to get it approved. And then they would sign the same documents. We would update with the Secretary of the State. Here's a new member agency. And they would now be part of our organization. And more cities joining would not expand anything. They would just basically plug in and be part of the organization. And I'll just say, hopefully, Campbell, and I wasn't clear on the date the city manager mentioned, you would have your council meeting on this item. But we are hoping that once a city decides to join, spread the word, the benefits of being part of the Cities Association, because we do believe that most, if not all, council members understand the value of the Cities Association. And if we're going to continue, then based on the legal recommendation and what we've all learned over the last couple of years, the JPA structure is really the best structure for us.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Vice Mayor Landry, do you have any?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Nisa. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Susan.
So you said you had the opportunity to apply for grants as a JPA. What type of grants were you looking at? And how would that conflict with the city individually trying to go after a grant?
Great question. So I'll give an example about sustainability. If there's an initiative that as a Cities Association, we believe we want to bring forward that would benefit all the cities in the county. And it would be better for us as an association to apply for this grant versus each city. Then we as a separate entity would apply for this grant. And then whatever funds we get for this sustainability initiative, and as you know, in grant applications, we'd have to describe how it's going to be used and benefit all of the cities as part of the group. That's an example of where if there's a project or initiative that collectively it makes sense for us to pursue and implement, that's something we would do as an organization.
So you would find out from each city beforehand of whether they were going after it individually or as a whole. And
Yes.
I texted the city manager, but I guess he didn't see my text. Are we getting our insurance through you guys? No. Okay.
No, so that's another reason why we really need to move to a JPA, Vice Mayor. We currently do not have insurance or structure as an unincorporated, and based on the current economic climate. We're not in a very good position to get insurance, but by moving to a JPA, there are more opportunities for a governmental entity to get insurance and better protect us as an organization. So that's another reason why the JPA structure would benefit our cities and the organization.
And what happens if cities do not move forward with this? What's the downside come the new year?
So the downside is, all the benefits we talked about, the collaboration, working together, even, the fun side of being able to get together and benchmark and share what's happening in each other's cities. We wouldn't have a venue to do that. And so that is so the Cities Association, essentially, as it exists today, doesn't protect our individual cities. It doesn't allow us to have a clear tax status. It doesn't allow us to get insurance. So there are all these things that are red flags if we continue the way we are today. And so if we decide we want to continue as an organization because of these benefits, then we'd recommend the JPA. If we do not have 9 or more cities signing up to be part of the JPA, then November 9th, because the board still exists in this very risky structure, we'd have to decide, where do we go from here, knowing full well that based on the legal recommendation, it is not advisable to continue in this structure. So we lose a lot if we don't have a Cities Association. And if we do want a Cities Association, because there's so many benefits, San Mateo has a JPA just like we want to do. And, they'll share with you how great it is because you can do so much more together.
Okay, my last question. So 9 or more, we move forward. Some won't sign up right away. The fees, the dues paid don't change. So if cities don't sign up right away and they add later, what do they pay the due they used to be paying? And then our budget can be increased. So as city, so if I'm X city and I don't join right away and I join next year, my dues would still stay the same. It's just the Cities Association could then adjust the budget for the additional income. Okay, that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Councilmember Lopez, any questions?
Yeah, Nisa, thanks so much for the presentation, for being here. It's wonderful to see you. And thanks for answering all our questions. I know you're putting a tremendous amount of work into this, and then the rest of the board directors, so it's greatly appreciated. I have a few questions just to clarify some things. I guess I'll start with what's the ballpark of the current annual budget of the Cities Association?
This is when, nice to see you, Councilmember Lopez. This is when I punted over to the executive director.
Yeah, so by our current process, the budget was passed in May, and it is roughly $250,000 budget, give or take a little.
That contractor costs?
Yes. As a matter of fact, the bulk of the budget pays for the contractors. And the contractors are myself, our legal counsel, our bookkeeper, for example.
And so what exactly would there be to cut if I'm assuming that contractors are paid on an hourly basis?
We have put in a little bit of money. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. So Councilmember Lopez, if you look at our budget, it's very bare bones. And so the two big ticket items that we've had over the years, and again, it would be up to the board, but we fund the annual holiday party. And we also have a summer event. Over the years, sometimes we've been able to have an organization sponsor the event. Other times we've had to pay for it ourselves. And so again, it will be up to the new board to decide where they cut. But if I were on the board, those are the two easy things for me to figure out. Okay, can we figure out how to not have to pay for these events? Another thing the board can decide to do, we love what Executive Director Sir Kay is doing, but do we cut her hours? With our general counsel, I will tell you that our current budget is heavily weighted legal right now because of the JPA, because of all the work they're doing. For tonight, we're like, do we really need them? Like, that's the kind of calculation we have to be doing. And so I also imagine that moving forward, once we form the JPA, that our legal hours will go down. So those are the kinds of adjustments that we would have to make.
And what calendar is your fiscal calendar on?
It's July
Is it
1st.
July 1st?
Yeah, July
through
1st.
30th.
So there really would be time to cut from those budget items that you mentioned. And are there startup costs associated with forming a JPA, like fees to the state, apart from the legal costs that you just named that I know have already been, as best you can, I kind of accounted for?
Shali, do you know if there's, I'm guessing, knowing the Secretary of State and how the filing, I'm sure there is a filing fee. I would be shocked if there wasn't a filing fee associated with filing the papers with the Secretary of State. But that would be, as you said, a one-time startup cost. And that's another benefit. We should have everybody sign up at the same time, so we're not filing multiple times with the Secretary of State every time we do an amendment. But yes, I imagine there is a filing fee, but it would be a one-time filing fee.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate your transparency and the kind of the strategy around in the current year keeping the budget flat, no matter the number of cities that sign up. But and I wouldn't say this is my primary concern. I think there's bigger considerations like legal exposure, insurance, etc. But to the extent that there's going to be cost, I'm less concerned about this year than in years going forward. So I'm wondering, and this might be an unfair question. I was trying to find it, but it sounds, Nisa, you're on the peninsula. Shali, I know you are too. Do you know around what the budget is? And again, ballpark, not looking for specifics, but for San Mateo or any of the other kind of council of governments, just trying to get a picture.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, Councilmember Lopez. That's a good,
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, in the research that I've done in looking at what the dues that other such similar organizations have, the reason we bring up that Santa Clara County is one of those unique counties with a very large population that's made up of very small and very large cities. And the only other county that really has the same sort of makeup, well, they have more cities, is Orange County. They have small cities and really large cities. And their annual budget is approximately, if I remember correctly, it's like 5 or 6 million. Their organization, they got a very large budget.
That's helpful knowing, because I know San Mateo is not, I was looking for that because I'm guessing we might know better, but it's not apples and oranges because they don't have a San Jose, and there's more cities and
exactly
a smaller overall population. But I think that's helpful as a ballpark. I mean, I don't doubt that in some way eventually costs are going to have to go up. I don't think that should be our primary consideration, but I think it's realistic to expect and use some of that as a benchmark, and to try to, if we move forward, figure out a strategy for what that looks like, and really answer those questions of, well, what is Orange County doing? What kind of structure do they have? I doubt that every city is paying in the same in costs. A lot of counties that have JPA for their council of governments have a lot of other duties that they handle besides city selection committees. And so that may be a part of it. I just don't have all of those answers, and it would give me a lot more confidence to know the long-term picture of what that's going to look like.
Councilmember Lopez, could I just make 3 quick points? So one, in the staff report, one of the recommendations from our executive director to the board, and again, ultimately it's going to be the board's decision, is that after this coming fiscal year, so FY25, anticipate a CPI adjustment. So that's, that would be the budget adjustment. The second thing I wanted to share is what we're proposing doing as a JPA, the type of work and things that we would do would not look different from what we're doing right now as a cities association. And this budget that Shali mentioned has been consistent, right? And to the extent we want to take on bigger projects or initiatives, then I would imagine the board would take the responsibility of figuring out, we don't want to increase dues on our cities. Is there a grant? Is there a co-sponsor? Are there other things we can do to fund this initiative, as opposed to what maybe other counties are able to do, where they go back to each city and increase the dues amount to cover these additional things. But I do think, as a board, and you're a board representative, we should do the responsible thing of, this has been our budget. Our budget, give or take, it hasn't moved a lot, which is great because we're doing the same things. But if we do want to do more things, then we need to be fiscally responsible and figure out how we're going to fund that.
Yeah. And my last question is, you said is just, looking at some of those other kind of parallel JPAs, why not have the county as a member?
I am going to
Go ahead, Shali.
I will let you answer that, because I did do a calculation of unincorporated Santa Clara County, right? That doesn't fall under any of our cities. And at our board meeting, I presented the budget in April. You all voted on it in May. When I presented it in April, one of the other board members, I explained my thinking, my logic behind it. And he said, I don't think we have to worry about the unincorporated parts, because collectively, we all pay for them together. And and I think that we have, and Councilmember Flagler, you can speak to this, but we've made a conscious decision not to include the county as a member of the Cities Association.
We have, not just our laws are different and our authority is different, but there are times when obviously we're not 100% aligned with the county, or priorities may be different. The structure is different from a city versus a county, and what the county works on looks a lot different from what we work on as cities. And so it's really just giving our association the identity of being a cities association. Why over the past 20 plus years, we have stuck with being just a cities association. Even on ABAG, Sergio, you and I, you have the county representatives and you have the city representatives, and sometimes we don't agree, right? And so I do believe that it makes a lot of sense to have that distinction. Having said that, I will give credit to Santa Clara County, where they have had a county rep assigned to our cities association, and they show up, they give input, they share what's happening. And so we have them at the table without giving them a vote. And so it has, I think that model works well. And it's the identity that we've wanted.
Yeah. Our cities don't always agree either. And I think that's fine, part of the process. I won't get hung up on that as the biggest consideration, but San Mateo, I know has the county as part of it. And the county, actually, the real reason I ask is because the county has more money than we do. In San Mateo's case, they house the JPA. And so there may be other benefits that may make the proposal your lives easier going forward, but I leave that as something to think about. But I think that's helpful in answering my questions for now.
I may make one small point, since we're talking about the budget, just to reassure anyone who's wondering what happens if we don't get all 15 cities right away, which of course we would like to, our approximate burn rate right now is about $17,000 a month. And we have enough in reserves to last, I would say, if I did the math, about 5 or 6 months worth. So we have money to continue as we've been continuing and give the other cities a chance to join.
Thank you. And I have a couple questions. One has to do with if a city decides to opt in and then 6 months down the road or a year down the road decides that they no longer want to belong, is there a penalty, an opt-out penalty clause to that city?
There's no penalty, whatever, but I'm trying to remember the exact language, whatever obligations that city has signed up for whatever period, they'd be obligated to complete that commitment, but there's no penalty.
Okay. And at the last board meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the structure, what I would call the structure of the organization with the power of the executive board versus the executive committee. There's also a legislative action committee, and there's also a board of directors. And since I've been a member of this organization for the last couple years, the first year I was on the board, and the second year I've been on both the legislative action committee and the board of directors. There appears to be a lot of confusion and a disconnect between those two committees, the board of directors and the legislative action committee. And I'm wondering, has there been any discussion prior to this last meeting and beyond my representation on the board as to whether or not to combine those committee to have one board of directors and then a subset of that serving as a legislative action committee that can make recommendations to the board? Because as I said, there just seems to be a disconnect and extra work that's being done in preparing agendas, and it seems like it could be streamlined. So has there been any discussion to that effect?
Not in any detail that I'm aware of, Mayor Bybee, but I do want to touch on a couple of things. So as you know, we have the executive, I'm going to call it the committee because that would be the new name under the JPA. And that's just the administrative arm. We plan the meetings, work with the executive director to plan the agenda and get speakers, those kinds of things, the day-to-day things for the organization. Then we have the board of directors, which is where we have each city representative, and they will make all the decisions for the organization. Now, the legislative action committee, you're correct, it is currently a standalone committee, and there are two reasons why it continues to be that way. And when I said not in a lot of detail, I remember, was it San Jose? There was a city that asked if the same person needed to be on the board as the LAC. And I remember we said no, because we're leaving it up to each city to decide if they want to have multiple people, one on the city selections committee, one on the LAC and one on the board, or if they want the same person across all groups. And that's because it's up to your city how you want to do that, and there are pros and cons to having the same person for the point you're making, because if you have the same person on the legislative action committee, then when the board votes, then it's the same person. And for those listening who may not understand the process, I'll do a quick 1-minute overview. The legislative action committee, again, has a representative from each city, and the main purpose of LAC is to consider different ballot measures, bills, as a committee, and then make a recommendation to the board of directors on a position to take on that bill. So we can send a letter from the organization or make phone calls or add our names to a list. So the LAC really is not a final decision-making body. It is a recommending body. And so they will recommend a position, and then it goes to the board of directors to vote on whether or not they accept the recommendation and then decide what action they want to take. one of the benefits of having the LAC separate from the board, Mayor, is, as you know, the LAC gets into a lot more detail on the bills. We bring in speakers. It's a bigger discussion. We weigh the pros and cons, what an amendment would look like. Whereas the board doesn't do that. It's just one agenda item on the board agenda. They quickly get a report from the LAC chair, and they may have one or two questions, but it's normally an up or down vote from the board. And so that's the benefit with having the Legislative Function Committee separate from the board. You're able to get into more detail. But I agree with you. I think we're not mandating it, but this is great feedback where I do think there are benefits to having the same person on the LAC serve on the board. I do. But we have left it up to each city to determine if that's what works for them. And for the JPA, this is not, we could have this in the bylaws. Like what we're talking about is something more appropriate for the bylaws. But I will tell you, just going through this process, we have gotten really good feedback, even if it's not JPA specific, really good feedback on how we can improve things.
Okay, I just look at it as a disconnect, and I'm not sure that all cities really understand the appointments to those two committees, honestly, because there always seems to be confusion about who's voting. Well, that person is not the representative. So, and to me, we're at a crossroads here where we're trying to create a JPA, and now would be the time to streamline things and make it more make it easier and more informative for the people that serve on the board. So that's
great. But I understand. As someone who's been LAC chair, I see this all the time because you have a representative. Let's say, I know you serve on both, but you could have a Campbell LAC representative and a Campbell board person. And, we're also hoping the reps talk, but I know sometimes the meetings are back to back, so you don't even have that conversation. So I recognize your concern 100%. I get it. And I remember San Jose asking that. But to date, we have left it up to the cities to decide. I think as a board, we can decide if we want to mandate that in the bylaws and require that it's the same person serve on both. And we'll see what majority of the cities think.
Okay, thank you.
May I make a quick comment? Mayor Bybee, I'm taking notes on what you're saying. I think that would be wonderful to put in a board member orientation and a LAC member orientation. We haven't really done that through the pandemic, but I think that's probably something we need to do, kind of clarify whatever all the confusion is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions? Okay. So do we want to look for some consensus that we're leaning towards?
We're looking for feedback. Obviously, it's not for council action tonight. The staff's looking for feedback and whether or not council's interested in coming back with an agenda item to consider the GP document. Between now and then, we'll be sure to follow up with you on any discussion points you had. We give the city attorney a chance to do a final review for the legalese of the document. We bring it back to you ready to go. As I said, I think on the November 7th meeting.
Okay. Any further discussion of that or that direction, or
just make a comment? Okay. Based on what I've heard tonight and what I've read, I would be in favor of bringing this back and certainly considering us supporting the JPA as an instrument for conducting appropriate business.
Vice Mayor Landry, any comments from you?
I'm leaning towards supporting the JPA. I'd like some clarification, and I don't know if that goes in the documents we have about the grants and the funding, and that there wouldn't, like you wouldn't conflict with what a city was going to go after, and a little more clarification of what would be grant potentials. But the clearer thing is, how does it, like if the city wants to go after, how does that conflict with the cities association? So clarify how that would happen. Like, would we all have to vote as a city, or kind of, anyways, mostly around that for now.
Lopez?
I definitely agree with bringing it back and also, and I wanted to say a word on why I think the need for it now. I mean, I've never served as a representative to the cities association, so Mayor Bybee probably know better. But just from what I know and have learned and read, doesn't seem like it's tenable to continue in the way it is, just because of the exposure, liability, insurance, all these things. And so, I think the vice mayor has great questions. So, I don't need to repeat them, but I think those are important things to figure out. You heard my feedback and some of my, I wouldn't say concerns, but I think potential areas, because I really, more than a particular dollar amount for this year, next year, let's say, I'm really interested in how can we get the most value out of this. And at some point that may mean, this is obviously a discussion for much further down the line, but may mean that the cost goes up if the value and services that we're getting exceed that amount. And so I think there's a potential for future discussion there. I don't think that all of the points that I raised need to be addressed before it comes back. I mean, I think it's something for a board with our representatives on it to figure out if this becomes a JPA and goes through. But you heard some of my thoughts. I hope, Charlie, I know you're taking notes, and I just, I hope that's considered in the future, but I definitely think it would be appropriate for it to come back to council.
Mr. Scozola?
Yeah, I think I'd just say I'm generally for the JPA. It's just as simple as that, really. But I'm definitely willing to listen to more details. And it sounds like we have a little bit of time before we make our final decision. So that's it.
And my final comment is that, yes, I agree with Councilmember Furtado. The strength of the organization is that all 15 cities participate. So whatever can be done to encourage those that may be on the fence or maybe not wanting to opt in to be encouraged to do so would be great. And if you could provide some of the answers to the questions that Vice Mayor Landry asked, and prior to the next to November 7th meeting. And also if any other issues arise from the cities that you're presenting at that are different than what you heard here tonight, we also appreciate to hear any possible changes that might be made to the JPA.
Will do, Mayor. And I just want to thank all of you again for allowing us to present. This was also very helpful to us. And so the next steps is exactly that. We will get answers to all the questions raised here. And thanks to your city manager for getting it on the November 7th agenda. That's much appreciated. So thank you all. Have a good evening. I hope you're not till 12 midnight.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Nice seeing all of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
You're on mute, Ann.
Well, I just said that. I just said that was good. That's all.
Oh, I can't hear Ann. She was speaking, but I couldn't hear her.
I just adjourned the meeting.
Oh, okay.